I am so excited to have you as a guest on Talk with Sally. Thank you so much for agreeing to take part. So people can understand what we're going to talk about, can you just give a bit of an overview of who you are and what you do, please?
Sure, Sally, great to be here. I think probably the first thing I should say is, one, I'm a public speaking coach. I don't actually particularly enjoy public speaking. I don't wake up in the morning thinking, God, I can't wait. I can't wait to be delivering something in front of somebody a little bit later. What I do come from is a business background as well. That's the other misconception. I think a lot of people often think, public speaking coach must have done drama. No, I come from a business background. So they're kind of the two things. But I fell into this situation where I ended up running one of TED's local conferences, TEDx Clapham, and just saw the power that a talk can have and the domino effect that message can have if it's delivered in the right way. And rather organically, over a period of a few years, I ended up starting to do it as a job. And if my teachers could see me now, oh my goodness.
I love it. And I should probably also share that I've been on one of your courses. That's how we met, and wholly endorse what you do and think you're great at it. Hence the invite to share it with a wider audience with me today.
Honoured to be here.
Alex and I were joking beforehand, what a great role reversal. I get to now interview him as opposed to the other way around. So right now, the world is not an easy place. I think, my focus as a leadership mentor is about supporting people with that journey. And I thought inviting you in on Talk with Sally would be a great way of specifically helping people hone their leadership voice and bringing your technical skills and gifts around just giving people advice and insight around how to do that well. What though at the moment, because I think, the world is one place giving a lovely leadership voice and talk in a stable, secure, growing economy and, plentiful talent. But when the world's difficult, I think getting that voice out there is even more difficult. So what are the barriers you're hearing leaders especially are coming up against at the moment in terms of getting their voice heard and getting themselves out there?
I think a lot of leaders are very, very sensitive to how messages might be received at the moment. That's certainly what I'm finding inside organizations. You have to be so careful these days. We're seeing it in the public realm as well. Someone says one thing slightly wrong, regardless of what the intention might have been, and backlash can come through. And when we're in this crazy place where we've got all the problems with the economy, but we've also got the world of work and the expectations of employees changing to such a degree, it can be very, very difficult. And I think that there are two things I'm seeing from leaders at the moment. I'm seeing a lot of overthinking, which often will lead to a diluted message. I think that's the key. And when people don't communicate their message clearly, it increases the amount of frustration and angst and worry and all of that's out there. So I think that's probably the biggest thing.
And so what would be your advice to change that, to make sure people are confident about the messaging, the voice they want to have as a leader, and the techniques on how they deliver it?
Well, I think some of it comes with practice. I think there are going to be certain scenarios where you certainly want to be preparing the message and actually thinking about, well, how is this going to be received? But I think one of the things that seems to be coming up a lot in my calls and so forth at the moment is this idea of relevance. Some people are over explaining and going into too much detail that isn't required, and actually sometimes the best messages are those that are kept simple. So maybe when you start, you want to just get all your thoughts out onto a piece of paper, but then you want to strip 50% of that off, cut all the fat off, and then hopefully you'll have something that looks quite strong. With regards to how you then take that message into delivering it and speaking it, well, it very much depends on the circumstances. But something that will certainly not help people is delivering something that is so perfect that it comes across as inauthentic and it comes across as you towing the company line. You've got to find a way to put yourself in there too, because people buy into people first.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It's mindset is critical to this, isn't it? And I would also say conviction. Because if you're not believing in your message somewhere deep in your conscience or subconscious, people know, and and no matter how much prep you do, it will just shine through. One thing we all had to adapt to with COVID and the changing the ways of working is all the remote, as we're doing our interview right now. Are there any practical advice or tips you can offer people around how to make sure your message lands well if we're still, if you're still giving it through a remote and even a hybrid situation? What's different about that than in a face-to-face, and how can people excel in those online deliveries of their messaging?
So hybrid's difficult, particularly when you've got a load of people in the office and then you've got this screen with a few faces on it. Really, really challenging. And I think actually when it comes to delivering anything online, as you know from my workshop calls, cameras had to be on, you've got to be engaged, and the more engaging you can make it. When you're remote only, the more engaging you can make it, the more people feel compelled to listen and get involved. Because unfortunately, if you don't create or increase that level of engagement, people will only be half paying attention. We love to multitask, and when you're multitasking, you're not really listening or taking in what's being said. So you've got to condition your audience that little bit more in an online situation. Hybrid, I think one of the most important things is to just acknowledge them, even if they're the minority in the room, and you've got maybe there are only 2 or 3 people. You've got a boardroom of 20 people. 2 or 3 people are hybrid. Acknowledge them at the beginning, and whoever is presenting around that table when you're taking it in turns, make a point of acknowledging them and finding a way to bring them into the conversation. It's a small thing, but it makes a huge difference. And being conscious that they are there, they will have a voice and opinions too, and they will want to use the platform the way others might do as well. So I think being conscious on that side of things is key as well. Now, if you're remote and maybe everyone else is there, I think the biggest simple tip that I give everybody is stand up. Stand up. Because when you stand up, you can move about, you can inject your passion, you can talk more conversationally, and it makes the world of difference. That's sort of what you were saying to me a minute ago. You need to have conviction in what it is that you're saying. And to have conviction, you need to take a minute before whatever message you're delivering is and be like, well, this might be what I'm saying, but why do I care about this? Remind yourself why you care about it, because your head might have been in a completely different place before, and then channel whatever that thing is that's going to drive you through. And all the things that you expect a public speaking coach to be talking to you about will take care of itself, because you wouldn't be a leader if you hadn't got a certain level of expertise communicating to start with.
This is true. The one thing that I think people often find surprising is it can be the biggest extrovert leader who deep down actually doesn't like public speaking, have just got so skilled at it, but if they had a choice, they really wouldn't do it. So what top tips do you have for people to just to like it genuinely? Because I've been on that journey. I used to be terrified of public speaking. People would say to me, "You really? You're really outgoing." I said, "I know, but I'm bloody terrified of that," because no one really taught me early in my career. And now I absolutely love it. It's something that gives me a lot of joy. Yeah. Still the butterflies, but joy. So how do you teach people? Can you teach people to actually like doing it in the first place? That's my first question, Alex. And then secondly, what are those practical tips for people to really hone the art of it? To 5 great things to be a public speaker. So firstly, to enjoy it. Secondly, there's 5 real nuggets of gold that will amplify your skills as a public speaker to excel. Okay,
the only way you're going to enjoy it is by practicing it. It's not one of those things that you just suddenly wake up one day, oh, I love it. It doesn't work like that.
Very true. Very true.
And if I think back to my kind of public speaking journey, we had a public speaking competition at school. I would skip that class, would actively go out of my way to avoid it. And it was only when I was forced to present every single day that I started to see things slowly but surely turn around. So the simplest tip I can give you to start liking it is to practice. You have to put yourself out there, and you have to, even if it's not in what you consider to be a high stakes big conference scenario, maybe it's you're in a room full of people who you really respect, and you need to tell them what you think, or you need to ask them a challenging question, and the spotlight's going to be on you, and you're going to hold the room for a few seconds. And I think that what we call this exposure therapy, right? What we often don't like about public speaking isn't speaking, because we talk all the time. We don't wake up in the morning and not enjoy talking. We love communicating. It's the heart of what we do. But in those situations, it's the physical fight or flight response symptoms that manifest that we often struggle with. And learning to, by regularly exposing yourself and pulling the trigger so that you experience the nerves and the shoot up of adrenaline, and maybe your face goes red and all of that stuff, the more you experience that, the less of an impact it will end up having, because you just get used to it. And there are certainly little tweaks and tips that you can give yourself, but just start. And it's start on your own terms. Don't start because you've got a board meeting next week and you've got to present. Start because you want to. Though the board meeting is bonus. It's that small act of courage, right? It's that small act of courage that means actually, no, you're doing this because you've made the decision to. You start and you praise yourself for the fact that you opened your mouth and you said something when you previously you might not have done that at all. That is something to be celebrated. And the more you do that, the less you realize, and suddenly, before you know it, that fear starts to dilute and dampen itself. So that's part one.
Yeah, very good advice. So to just get out there, get the muscle working, and maybe just bite off little bites to start with, just to get practice.
Yes. Part two, I'll give you 3. I won't give you 5. I'll give you 3. I think you need 3 things to be a great communicator. I think you need clarity of message, and again, that comes with practice. But that's around how you're structuring your presentations and your ability to bring stories in to the things that you're saying, or maybe questions to get your audience thinking. So clarity is really important. Second thing you need is connection. And connection is about your ability to engage your audience. So it's being able to read the room well and adapt your communication style to the people you're speaking to for the occasion you're speaking about. And then the third thing you need is confidence. And confidence, there are two sides to confidence. We can make ourselves look confident. You were talking about the extroverted speaker who we all think as an audience member loves being on stage, loves the limelight, and they get off stage. You know, you go behind the scenes at TEDx Clapham. Maybe a lot of speakers at TEDx Clapham, but I wouldn't say so many of them, judging by their responses before they went up to speak, were loving the idea of standing up on stage at that moment. We can put on a front, and I think actually leaders in particular can be very good at putting on a front, but actually underneath there's no inner confidence there whatsoever. Their inner confidence is wafer paper thin. And I think that the kind of confidence that you really need is forget what you look like on the inside. I want to know that when you're speaking, you are feeling that confidence and you back yourself to be delivering the message that you're going to deliver. I think there's a very good measure for it, and actually ties really nicely into how the world has changed and how presenting has changed in the different environments we're in now. And that's how many words you take in with you to deliver the presentation. Now in lockdown, I got lazy. I'm sure a lot of other people did too, right? You could just have all of your notes just below the webcam,
yeah.
And you can reel them off, and you get really good at presenting as though you've not got any notes there whatsoever. But then when you transition back into delivering in person, you can't take that amount of notes back with you. And so I think a really, it's not perfect, but a base level of level of inner confidence is how detailed are your notes? Are you bringing in a full script with you? Are you bringing in detailed prompts, or have you got the odd words that you got it, and that's enough to take the flow?
Brilliant advice. And I remember back in the day, I just used to have to physically write out my whole talk longhand, and then get it down to A4, then get it down to postcards.
Yeah, completely.
And now I just use images. That's my kind of structure is the visual, because how do you feel about that? Do you think visual, obviously the right kind of visual, is a good thing to always have with a talk? Are there occasions when, if you're wanting to get your voice, your message across, a visual works, or sometimes it doesn't? Any scenarios you see that working in or not working in?
Occasionally. I mean, I think visuals are good. I think they can add to a talk when you use them properly. But what I do see a lot of is visual for visual's sake. And so the visuals that really work end up being lost because you've got other visuals in there that don't necessarily work so well. I think my favorite slide to use in a slide deck is a black slide just empty. Because if you've got a live projector behind you, a black slide makes it look like you've turned the projector off. And normally you've got a clicker with a button that will do that for you. But when you click the slide to click the projector back on, you're still on the last slide that you were on. So it's already too late, right? So a black slide kind of does the hard work for you. And my goal is always to have that black slide on for like at least 50% of my presentation, which means that the images that I do choose to put up, and when I choose to put them up, they really pop out then as a result.
They really connect. Just my last question, because I think you're giving loads of value and great tips and insight. I could talk to you all morning, but my last question is endings. We talk a lot about storytelling. A lot of people who watch these videos are skilled marketeers, advertising people, brand people. So they're experts in the craft of storytelling. But when it comes to landing your message and making sure you're influencing how people go away, because for me, the good presentation isn't just the technicality of giving it, it's what happens after it that is really important.
Yeah.
So what would be your top tips and advice around landing the message in a way that not only retains the power of the talk and the leadership voice, but also gets something to happen as a result?
Never, ever finish on Q&A. That would be my advice.
Okay, tell me more.
Often the last thing that somebody will say at the end of a presentation is, does anyone have any questions? And you go off into Q&A, and you've got no control over what those questions are going to be. Maybe they go off on particular tangents, and who knows, whatever happens. Maybe it's a really good Q&A session, but I've never walked out of a room being like, that Q&A was amazing. I don't know how many people have ever thought the Q&A section was the highlight. It tends not to be. So you've got to finish things on your own terms. I'm not saying don't have a Q&A section. What I'm saying is after the Q&A is finished, or when you're wrapping that Q&A up, you need to finish that presentation on your terms, which means remind them of the takeaway. What is the one thing? If there's one thing you want your audience to remember, what is it? So I call that the recap. And then impact. That's the final section. So what is going to happen when this takeaway comes to life? And then that's the 30 seconds where you paint a picture of the promised land, or you say something that sounds good and is going to get people to buy in and reminds them of all the reasons why this takeaway is important. And that brings that emotional intensity or creates an emotional peak at the end of the talk. And if you create the emotional peak at the end of the talk, science suggests your talk is going to be remembered far more.
On that note, Alex Merry, thank you very much for being a guest on Talk with Sally. It's been fascinating. I've learned a lot. I hope the audience have too. And thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Sally.